everyone. Welcome to episode 352 of F-Stop, Collaborate, and Listen with your host, Matt Payne. Before we get started, I wanted to thank our latest supporters of the show on Patreon. These amazing folks have stepped up to financially support the show by visiting patreon.com/F-Stop and Listen. Thanks to Clay Guthrie, Kathy Proenza, Chuck Wood, William Bruce McConnell, Cindy Wilson, and Ben Williamson. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart. This week on the podcast, I recorded with Aussie photographer Tania Malkin, who comes highly recommended by her esteemed peers from Down Under. Tania was recently awarded in the Australian Geographic competition and won the landscape category with a stunning out-of-camera aerial image that stopped me in my tracks. Alright, let's get to this week's episode with Tania Malkin. Alright, Tania Malkin, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, we are literally on the other side of the planet from each other, which always presents amazing logistical challenges, but we made it happen today.
We did, especially after my bad weather and bad satellite a few weeks ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you have come recommended by so many former guests of the show, especially all of our friends down in Australia, Mika Boynton, Matt Palmer, Ricardo DeCuna. Gosh, the list goes on of people who have recommended you. And then just last week, I recorded with someone named Ian Gaston, and he recommended you. So everyone loves you.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I don't get to speak or see people often, so it's nice that they, think of me.
Yeah, of course. Well, so Tania, for people who aren't familiar with you and your photography, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a photographer. I call myself a photographic artist because I think it has a better ring to it. I've always loved photography since I was a little kid, 7 or 8 years old, and I studied art and design at university with a major in fine art and art history, and desperately wanted to be a photographer, but I went with the visual arts painting. So I used to take photos to reference for paintings mostly. And then as the years went on and everything, I just ditched the paintbrushes and the paints and went back to photography, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. So it's funny. I teach a lot of workshops, and I feel like over the last year, I've had 3 people come on a workshop who are full-time painters, and they just wanted to get really good photographs that they could paint. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's that uncommon.
No, and I've always been a landscaper. Like, I love landscapes. I enjoy being out in remote areas and out in the bush, and always have ever since I was little. And so I guess like my preferred painting genre has always been landscape, and then and as well as my photography genre, I was an avid postcard collector when I was 5 years old. I love beautiful landscapes. I love landscapes that you want to dive into and touch and be a part of, and yeah.
I love that. And then are you doing photography full-time now, or do you do other things to put food on the table? What is that like for you?
There's not a lot of food on the table, so I do photography.
Oh, so you're a photographer. I get it.
I'm an artist, so I make ceramic things and sell them, and I paint a little bit. I draw mostly, and I take photographs. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're just selling various artworks at art fairs. Like, what is that like down there?
Yeah, art fairs, or basically wherever I can, like most artists that don't have a rich benefactor. I I try and sell stuff whichever way I can. So occasionally exhibit. and markets and art fairs and things like that. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, so I know that you'd mentioned that you were first a painter and a sculptor, and I'm curious, how has studying and using other artistic mediums like that informed your approach to photography?
I guess the main thing is light and color and how you use that. And like when you are painting a story, it has to be about something. So the constant when I'm photographing, um, good or bad, um, it has to be about something. So it's a constant question. What's it about? Is it about the tree? Is it about the sky? What comes forward? What comes back? Where does my eye go as soon as I look at the scene, or as soon as I look at the picture? Or if I'm doing a painting of a beautiful tree, it's around how I can highlight that tree. And I guess with photography and any kind of art or any kind of visual art, you need to have ways to pull the viewer in to look at an area that is interesting for you, but also becomes interesting and relevant for them. Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, maybe we can use a practical example to help further illustrate what you're trying to say here. Um, so my guest last week, Ian Gaston, he mentioned that there's a photograph of yours that just stopped him in his tracks and literally blew his mind, and he just could not stop looking at it for literally like minutes and minutes and minutes on end. And
Okay.
it's called a portrait of me, I believe. Something does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that particular image and how your history in using different art mediums helped you create that image, and what that image is about, and how it is a successful piece of art because of that.
I really love that piece of art and well, that image, and I guess like it resonates with me. It's from a trip that I did with Mika a few years ago now, a long time ago now, to Iceland, that we've both been desperately wanting to do, and we had planned it completely blind. There was not too many Aussies that had photographed Iceland at that time, and we sort of digging around plane companies and trying to find somebody that flew that fitted our budget and all that kind of thing. And I love black and whites, and but I find it very difficult to with aerials. There's not too many that hold up as black and whites. I think particularly in the areas that I photograph in Australia, because the colours kind of tell the story, and sometimes the contrast is created with the colour rather than the lights and the shadows. So I find it very, very hard to find an aerial that holds up as black and white. But that image from Iceland, which is an aerial over the glacial rivers, like most of the aerials in Iceland, but the human form in that image and the two human forms that I could see, and the way that the water and the soil created it almost like it was veiled, and then the portrait of the woman standing behind the man, which I saw as a strong, solid figure, and the woman was kind of subdued and all of that kind of thing. So I guess when I took that image, I had some things going on in my life, like everybody, and there's all that thing that us creatives go through. Am I good enough? Am I not good enough? And you have that whole creative journey up and down. Um, and yeah, so I guess that image just for me perfectly represented where I was and had just come out of in that point of my life. Um, I sort of hadn't taken a photo after that for about 3 years. So that kind of
Oh
said
wow.
something about where I was sitting at that time.
Mm.
Even a photo with my phone. So I was focused on painting and drawing because of where I was at that particular time. And so I guess that image illustrates for me perfectly at that time where I was, what my story was that was relevant to how I was feeling at that time, I guess. So I just, yeah, the way that the woman is veiled and like a, yeah. So yeah, that's that's the
So
story.
I'm curious. Yeah, no, I'm curious. When you were photographing that scene, did that story immediately strike you, or was it something that you pieced together after you were editing it?
I guess to my downfall, not to my downfall, when I'm flying, um, I'm very, I look for things and I saw that at the time. So that's a single frame image basically. Um, so I don't take 3,000 images on a aerial shoot. Like, it's not on rapid fire, I call it. And I'm very calculated with my shots. If I can't frame it, I don't take it. So sometimes, like, I'll only come home with 400 roughly, from 3 hours of flying, which is probably very low from people that I've flown with, what I see they take, or from what I hear, so, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure I got one in that. Yeah, so I mean, I don't see that in my research. Like, I didn't see that. I didn't go there to take that image. But when I'm flying, I'm constantly looking for things, and shapes will form. And, and a lot of it might just have to do with how high the exact height of the water that day. I might go back to reshoot that because I didn't quite nail it and it's not there. I can't find it anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I speak to a lot of photographers who are able to come up with images like that one, I find that they are relying a great deal on instinct and pattern recognition in terms of understanding that, okay, whatever I'm seeing right now, I know there's a lot of potential in this image.
Yeah, yeah.
And it sounds like that's kind of your approach to capturing photographs, especially in the air, is that you're just relying on your instincts to drive it home.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work out. And then I get home, I'm like, how did I not see that in the sky? Like, this, but I was looking at this bit, so which again is, a little bit to my downfall, because once you miss it, you miss it. It's gone, and it's pretty much gone forever, unless it's a landform or some. Well, there's all landforms, but unless, like if it's tidal, you're never going to get that exact same thing again. So you can't go back and reshoot it. But again, like, I think, I don't. I usually come home from flights with something. So I guess, um, there was, back. Oh, it's scary. It's nearly 30 years ago. 25 years ago, I would do workshops with photographers, and it was all about pre-visualization. You have to know before you take the photograph what the photograph's going to be. And, that was my training, like, the music score when you're playing a symphony, like, that's how I was trained. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting though is that your approach, I would say, doesn't really involve a lot of pre-visualization. I mean, from in my mind, pre-visualization means that before you're even walking or flying to wherever you're going, kind of in your mind what you're looking for. Whereas your approach is just look, respond, react, and capture.
Oh, sort of, because, um, like, if I just went, hey, there's a helicopter, let's go flying, that would be that
Well,
would
yeah, no, for sure. I
be
mean,
yeah.
I guess you're right. I mean, like when you're doing aerials, you have a flight plan, and you
Yeah,
know that you're gonna put yourself over parts of the landscape that are interesting, but the specific image that you're gonna capture, you don't know.
is unknown. Yeah, that's right. But I know what I'm looking for. Um, I know what my expectations are going to be, and, I mean, I don't know what incredible patterns are going to exactly be there. I might not, I don't know that, hey, I can see a bird in that, or hey, I can see a lily's leaf, which I think is one I just posted on Instagram. But I know that, like, I've done as best research and planning as I possibly can do to tick as many boxes as I can before I get up and know what I'm looking for. Like I come home, like sometimes there's spots that I fly all the time and the images are always so different. But I used to like get distracted and take, shots of things that are really pretty, but I never do anything with them. So like now I just think I'm not taking these because I don't do anything with them. Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's not my cup of tea, so to speak. Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. I find myself doing a lot of that too. I was actually um, I spent about 5 hours today looking at all the photographs I took in 2023, and I was just trying to see if there was some stuff in there that I hadn't edited yet that I was really happy about. And
yeah,
I came across so many images that I remember being really excited about what I was seeing, and it was beautiful. But then when I'm looking at them now, and I'm like, yeah, it's beautiful, but it's not really that good of a photograph. And there's so many images like that that I don't know why we're so drawn to capturing those photos. I'm glad that you have the discipline to just be like, I don't need to capture that.
you see, I like it's funny because if I take people to a spot, they'll be like, "Oh my God, wow, wow, wow," and I'm like, "Oh, can we move?" Like, but no, I guess I'm not spoiled, but I know now, like whether it's beautiful and yeah, it's interesting, it's really pretty, but it's not something I'd print, and it's not something I've printed for the last 7 years that I've flown over that site. So, like, yeah, unless something amazing's happening, I have a destination and I stick to it, because otherwise I might never ever achieve the destination that I originally went up to do. So, yeah, um,
Well, based on what I'm hearing you say, it sounds to me like you have a very honed in vision for what you want your images to look like, what you want them to convey, the ingredients that make up the full dish, if you will. And I'm
yeah.
curious if you could talk a little bit about how you've curated that particular style or preference for the images that you're now seeking.
I guess it comes down to well, the color and the light again plays a massive part. Um, so you know, and the locations where I can achieve that, particularly from the air, and again from the ground, like you stand at a vista, and you go, wow, this would be amazing. If there was a cloud and a rainbow and or and you plan to go back at a particular time, or well, I do. Like, you're always looking for vistas to photograph, and you think, yeah, well, that's a morning or that's an afternoon, or it wouldn't matter if there was snow or and things like that. And I guess it's the same for me when I'm from the sky. Um, but again, what excites me is I love the colours, and like I love the work of the abstract photographers, the aerial abstract photographers that, it splashes. It's like a painting that someone's just gone, thrown at the wall with the color balloons and stuff. Um, but I love it when I can see things in the images. I guess I like that I can see a tree or I can see a bird, or, because for that gives it an extra point of interest, something that gets my attention and that takes it from being, oh, that's really pretty, to, oh, wow, that's amazing. And yeah, I guess that's
So I
how.
think what you're talking about is pareidolia,
Yes.
right? Like where you can see faces or other
Yeah, yeah,
objects like a bird or a tiger or
yeah. And
a
I
person
always,
holding their arms up or something. You know
I
what I
think
mean? Yeah.
totally, and photo judges should have to sit one of those tests. Like, because competition judges should totally have to do an aptitude test with those. Like, yeah, it make my life much better. So many times people don't see the tree or the person or the look at it and go, what is
You're like,
that?
can't you see it? It's really good.
Damn
That's
you.
funny.
Did you not make pictures out of clouds when you were little?
Well, that's funny. Actually, just we just got done judging my competition that we do, the Natural Landscape Photography Awards, and there was a lot of images like that that have, figures in the landscape or faces and it's always interesting because I think it's it's not that hard to find those kind of things, but I think what's hard is to find those things and it also be a really good photograph, like including light and shadow and like exposure has to be good and it can't be too distracting and I think it's hard.
It is hard, yeah. Yeah, it is hard and well, I think it's hard. But it's hard to frame it in the sky and you can't if you don't get it right, you can't go back. Like, you can go back to a vista and yeah, the light might be a bit different and the clouds might be a bit different, but it's you get another go at it, but it's not can't usually go back and get another go at it from the sky. So yeah,
Yeah, high
well that's what
risk,
I
high
find.
reward.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
high risk, high reward. Yeah, definitely.
So I'm kind of curious about the inverse of what we've been talking about. How has your engagement in photography helped inform your approach to, say, painting or ceramics?
Again, in probably exactly the same way because I think I find that as I've matured with my painting, um, my description of light has as well, because I understand the shadows and the highlights. I have a deep understanding of the colours in the shadows and the highlights. Um, like blue shadows and purple shadows, and and where there should be magenta and where there shouldn't, and all of that kind of thing, and where there should be a royal blue shadow, where there shouldn't be a royal blue shadow. So yeah, I think that's definitely it. Yeah, I think that my it has absolutely given me a very good understanding of color placement, in highlights and shadows, and placement of where the light's coming from, exactly, and how everything in that painting or drawing has to be precise on the direction of the light and the angle of the shadow and my rules of thirds and my not rules of thirds, and deliberate placement of things. So yeah,
Okay,
and
that makes
and the
sense.
angles and perspectives that I use. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, so how did you get into aerial photography? I mean, it's not something that someone just, you know, decides one day like, "Oh, I'm going to become an aerial photographer." Like, how did you get into it?
Um, I had a corporate job that I used to fly a lot for. I was on, flying to and from towns or locations, my nearly 6 days a week, sometimes seven. Um, and I used to always take my camera because I would go to some pretty good locations. The Australians would be familiar with, like for work, or close, I'd go to places near Karajini or near Alice Springs and or the East Kimberley, Broome, Darwin, Connemara. So they were my sort of work locations. So I'd always take my camera, and then I'd always have a window seat, and I'm very cranky if I don't get a window seat. So not very cranky, but I'm always I'm like a person that doesn't have their morning coffee, I guess. I sit on with my bottom lip pouted if I didn't get a window seat. And then we'd be flying over places and I'd just be like, oh, I got to photograph that. I'd love to photograph that. And then there wasn't there was a few aerial photographers like there's a who has unfortunately now passed away, Richard Waldendorp, who is a fantastic aerial photographer. He passed away around 90 last last year or the year before. Don't know now. Last year I think. Old school air, film. Nat Geo completely catalogued most regions of Australia from the air um, and I've always loved his books, even when I was in high school. So that it wasn't a big thing, and I hired a tiger moth. You know the open planes, the World War II planes. You know with the
Oh, right.
open
Yeah.
open cockpit. 'Cause
Right. Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was the only like way that I could figure out that I could get open air without any doors, and so I hired a tiger moth. I think it was like was around the 2000s, maybe a little bit after that, 24, 25, and that was my first like planned aerial shoot, and I was hooked. I was hooked, so completely hooked, and then yeah, it's just down from there, I guess. Lots of practice, lots of fails, lots of not so great
Lots of
shoots.
lots of money that you've spent on
Yeah, lots
fuel
of
and
money and
pilots.
driving and pilots and then of course back then you didn't have Google Earth, so you know you did sort of, but not nowhere like it is now. So it was a lot of trial and error, yeah, with locations. So it didn't really ever fly anywhere that I hadn't flown over in a big bus. So or a commercial. So you know, whereas now it's a lot less error um, with selecting locations at Google Earth.
Right. Well, I know you had talked a little bit about this earlier, but you'd mentioned to me in our correspondence that you love to chase light.
Yeah.
What does that look like when you're doing aerial photography? Because
Oh.
you're up high and, everything's lit up by the sun. So what does it look like for you?
Um, so I try and pick the right time of day for the right tide, and what I want to shoot, basically. So, like everybody, like you've got golden hour and blue hour and all of that kind of thing, or you've got your middays, and I totally get why there's a lot of photographers around landscapers that shoot in their high midday sun because sometimes that's appropriate for the location or the particularly from the sky. So um, I try to determine what it is I'm looking at, and like with some JIS applications, will give me measurements on the contours on the ground, so I know whether I'm going to have deep shadows or shallow shadows, and so I try and apply that, like if it's tidal, the JIS application that I use will give me the depths of the sand waves or the sand dunes and that kind of thing. And so if I don't want shadow, or if I'm shooting a flat desert plain, it sometimes is better for me to shoot at a midday or early afternoon sun, because it's not going to give me shadows that interfere with what I want to photograph. Like if I've got cracked mud and the shadows are all going the wrong way, um, so they're going into the picture instead of out of the picture and all that kind of stuff. So that's basically how I would refer to what I'm chasing light. And sometimes I want long shadows, or I don't need shadows because the water and the wet ground will give the impression of shadows. So, and then if I've got wet ground on one side of a sand wave, which is the underwater dunes, and then I've got the actual shadow on the other side, it is really confusing for the viewer. So, yeah. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Well,
Is that
it
confusing?
does make sense. But I mean, it's funny that you say it's confusing to the viewer because I think sometimes confusing the viewer actually can be a good thing because it forces them to spend more time with the piece of with the image.
Yeah, that's true. But I've also found with Photoshop, people say you Photoshopped that. Um,
Oh
so like,
no, we're
what
not
have
gonna
you
go
done
there, are
here?
we?
You've put the shadows on the wrong side. I'm like, it's not shadow, it's wet ground. Because the light's hitting, yeah, like the hot light's hitting the same side as the wet ground. So, it's not a shadow, it's wet ground. That's why that's dark and that's it's wet. It's dark because it's wet. It's not dark because it's a shadow. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that's one thing I personally really like about aerials is that because the perspective is so different and it's probably not something you've ever seen before, it almost always forces you to like stop and look like whoa 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 what am I looking at here? And
Yeah.
then okay, yeah, it's an aerial, but like what else is going on here? And then that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I love that's what I love about it too. You have to think, and people can make their own. Like if you've got a tree again, a tree in a vista, it's a tree in a vista. um, but with an aerial, it invites you into the picture to interpret it with something that's relevant to yourself at the time. Yeah.
Right. And then I'm curious for how you approach your image making. Are you hoping that the viewer sees the same thing that you do, or are you just happy if they find something in the image that connects to them in some other way?
I'm just happy if they find something that connects to them. Like if it's about. I mean, as an artist, it's about somebody finding something that's relevant in the image to them at where they are at that time in their personal journey, and then that the relevance might shift and become something else at a different time. So yeah, if it's relevant to them and they consider it and they see something that I don't see, that's that's great. They can be a photo, it can be a photo judge. But no, I don't mean that. I don't. That, hopefully, that didn't sound arrogant. But no, but that's what it's about, isn't it? It's why we create art. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, earlier we've made a couple of jokes about how there's no food on the table and about how much money you've spent on fuel and airplanes and things like that.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't have a lot of money, what are some practical ways that they can get into aerial photography?
I guess I don't have a drone, and some of the best ways, and probably the cheapest because drones aren't very expensive now, would be to get a drone and to practice with that, to practice framing and to practice, you know, what heights they like and what lenses they like and what colours they like, and get used to steering from the air. I guess would probably be the most cost effective way now with the drone. And like I go to buy a drone and then I change my mind for whatever reason. Might be because I've been camping and I've had drones fly over me all week. so, so that usually turns shifts my decision from maybe I should get one to no, I'm not getting one.
Right.
So I I guess that's probably the most cost effective way now, for that kind of thing. Or if you know you to fly with friends, and to fly with other photographers. Helicopters fit three shooters in. You might not be able to fly as far because it will be heavier, but they fit three, and the cost is shared is a lot more practical. And planes are cheaper, but I find planes a lot harder to shoot out of, for a number of reasons. And I shot with a friend, Nigel, a couple of weeks, well, nearly over a month ago now, a few weeks ago, and we were in the plane and neither of us could see. I'm short and like Nigel's tall, but he was at the front, so he couldn't see over the nose, and I couldn't see anything. So I was just relying on Nigel to like, take us somewhere that was half decent. And like we were in the area because like I picked the site, but I couldn't see out of the back. I couldn't see anything. So,
That's
like
frustrating.
it's frustrating. I got shots, which was a relief that he used. Not as many as I should have got, and I'll definitely go back to that site in a helicopter. So, again, like you save on planes, but you lose as well. So, yeah, yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah, I've only done, let's see, I've done two helicopter flights and doors off helicopter. I'm in the window, like right,
yeah.
like it's me and air right next to me. And that was honestly one of the most fun things I've ever done in my entire
It's
life.
so fun. So fun.
Yeah.
Like it's just so fun. Like even well back, in the early 2000s, like it wasn't easy to get a pilot that would take doors off planes and helicopters. Kind of I live in the north of Australia and helicopters are everywhere because they use them for agriculture and they use them, they're everywhere and they're not hard to get. But further south you come, they're hard to get because it's windy. Like it's so windy down south.
Mm.
It's not comfortable flying, but um, so like, I was up in hot air balloons, and basically, if there was a way I could get in the sky, that I got in the sky. But yeah, the it the helicopters are so fun, especially when you're in like a proper media helicopter where you can be sitting on the skids and strapped in with a harness, and yeah, yeah.
Have you done a hot air balloon?
I have, yeah, yeah. I did a hot air balloon.
How's that? Because I saw one flying around here the other day, and I was like, ooh, that would be really fun to fly around in that thing with a camera.
It's really surreal because it's so quiet. Like all
Mm.
you've got is,
Mm-hmm.
because you're not in a machine. You're in, and it's so quiet and so um, you can't fly very high, obviously, but like um, the yeah, it was such a peaceful, surreal experience, and because you're doing it like with perfect conditions as well, so like just well, I did early in the morning, and yeah, it was just massive long shadows, like massive long shadows. And I ran out of
Mm.
film. I was using film back then, so I ran out of film, and then all I had was this crappy old mobile phone that the old.
Yeah,
It
doesn't
was
work too
one of the
good.
first ones with a camera like this. I can't remember what brand. The little ones that would fold open.
Right,
So,
like a razor, like a Motorola razor.
yeah, like one of them. And like, so I've got a couple of photos like from the end of that hot air balloon flight on my old crappy mobile phone. But I ran out of film, so yeah.
That's funny. All right, well, I'm gonna shift gears on us here. So one thing you also mentioned to me, and it was more in the emphatic nature of which you mentioned this in your correspondence, that you do not like cities. And I was hoping you could explain a little bit what that's about for you.
Oh, cities stress me out. Like I'm well, I'm not saying I'm a chilled out person. Like I definitely have my idiosyncrasies with organisation and planning. So, but I'm I'm I like to be at Tanya pace, which is zero pressure. um,
Got it.
and like and I don't function well with like noise like going on, and so I I spend nearly all of my time in the bush. Well, I live in the bush, and and I live in a place that I think the population is just over 200 people. So
Oh wow.
um and there's no traffic lights. There's not even a crosswalk or a roundabout. Um, and and then I live. It's about 200 k's, 2 hours from the nearest city. Um, and then, but I've just spent 4 months out bush um, with my dog and my swag, which is just. Do you guys know what a swag is over there?
No, I was hoping you could
No.
tell me what the heck
Oh,
that is.
a swag is just like a roll up mattress canvas little tent thing. I guess like a hiking tent. But in Australia, it's a swag, which
Okay,
contains the
so
mattress, and you just roll it up. It goes, yeah, in your car.
gotcha.
So yeah, it's just been my dog and me for 4.5 months in the
Wow.
bush. Um,
So okay, so I know in Australia y'all say in the bush all the
yeah.
time, and we don't have anything like that here in the United States. Basically,
Oh,
you say some like for us it's like wilderness
oh,
or
wilderness. Yeah, yeah,
the desert or the mountains. Like
yeah.
we're more specific about
Okay.
in the environment. So
Then
like when you say
okay.
the bush, is that just like a overarching term that
Yeah.
refers to outside?
So I've been, where have I been? I've been in the desert and I've been in the, we don't really have mountains, we got hills. So I've been in the hills, which I guess would be your mountains. I've been away from people, so yeah. And I've been on the coast, so again, a couple, 3 or 4 hours from the nearest civilization or mobile phone service and things like that.
And
Yeah.
are you taking pictures? Like what are you doing while you're out there?
Yeah, so I've been taking pictures. I've been shooting aerials mostly. I've been waiting between tides. So because um, the tide cycle is 2 or 4 weeks, so I've been I've been shooting a spot and then I've been waiting for the next tide to move to the next spot kind of thing. So I've been filling in 4 week gaps basically between tides. So instead of staying in hotels, I decided to camp out in the bush mostly near the beach because it's been so hot because I've been up over 40 degrees Celsius, which I'm not sure what that converts to in Fahrenheit. But yeah, it's been hot. It's been, well over 40 most days. So yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's where I've been. Well, I've been hiding
Nice.
out. Yeah, in the wilderness.
So so what does that lifestyle look like for you? I mean, are you by yourself with other people? Are you
Yeah, yeah. Just me and
just
my
by
dog.
yourself?
Just
Yeah,
by
just in your dog.
myself, me and my
And
dog,
are
and yep.
like what are you doing for food?
Oh, I don't eat a lot. Like I kind of lived off cheese and tomato sandwiches for about the
Okay.
last 3 months. And my dog eats very well. Got a fridge that runs off a solar panel in my car, so
Okay,
um,
okay.
so my dog that's usually full of dog food, and we take. I think I start with about 60 liters of water, so I'll take about 60 liters of water, and then go just fill up again if I need to, and then everything runs off my solar panel. So yeah, batteries, recharge, camera, laptop, yeah,
Yeah,
all
I've
that
got a
kind of stuff.
refrigerator that runs off my solar panel too, but it's
Uh,
usually full of beer.
oh, I couldn't negotiate on the space for alcohol. Alcohol got ditched for dog food and camera equipment. Three,
That's fair.
three tripods, two camera bags, like a lot. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, another question I had for you, because this came up in the conversation I had with Mika as well. How do you try to increase awareness around the indigenous owners of the areas that you like to photograph?
Well, I've worked a lot on Indigenous communities, so I don't know what the reservations are like in the US, but in Australia, they're usually fairly isolated and only Indigenous people, and I've learnt a lot living there and have. an amazing respect for their understanding of the landscape and the stories that connect with it. And I guess in Australia, until fairly recently, maybe the last 10 years or so, most Australians have been very ignorant about, um, the indigenous connection and the stories and the ownership of the land and all of that kind of thing. And I think that um, where I know the language group or the group of traditional owners that speak to that land, I try always try and acknowledge and seek permission from to be on that land and to photograph um, that land. Like, and there might be designated tourist areas where people are allowed to go, like they've sort of said that they can go there, but I just try to make sure that I photograph it in a culturally appropriate way. And if in fact it is allowed to be photographed at all, and have some sort of understanding of the story that might sit around that particular site. Um, and then I'll, where I know definitely that there is a tie to that site to a language group, then I will usually always try to acknowledge that group and also share the images with the appropriate organisation um, of who owns or speaks for that location. And also, if there's a story around it, like there's a place called Kalu Kalu, which is the Devil's Marbles, for example, in Northern Territory. Um, they ask people not to climb on the rocks, or and so if I post an image from there, I'll try and include that the traditional owners have asked that that you don't climb on the rocks, that it's Kalu Kalu, that it's Kalu Kalu is so much nicer than the Devil's Marbles.
It is.
you know, like, but yeah, so, and then use that as the reference. There's a place in the Kimberley called the Coburn Ranges, which is also called Dudaroo. And so, if I can educate that the actual name is Dudaroo, not the Coburn Ranges, then, it's just, it's a step towards respect, and an ongoing education, and a need, for people to appreciate and understand the culture that goes with it. And I think it helps you appreciate the landscape around it as well, and to seek, once you have a little bit of information, you seek more. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking that I have a feeling that you're spending more time than the average person trying to understand some of these stories of the indigenous people and kind of what specific landmarks or different landscapes have meant to them, either through rituals or traditions that they might hold with those areas. And I'm curious how, for you, how learning about those stories and about those connections has influenced your approach to capturing images in those locations.
Ah, um, I think, um, particularly with the Australian Indigenous culture, it's not a competition, and there's nothing competitive about the culture at all. And it's very much observe and decide. And I think when you're photographing an area that is is incredible and untouched and so magnificent, the need to rush around and take as many photos as you can, and oh my god, like I've got to, look at that, let's just run over that, and without stopping and appreciating the, the awesomeness, I guess really is the only way to put it, that's around you. And sometimes it's best just to sit and take it all in, and be in that moment and understand the landscape, and listen to the sounds and just appreciate what is there, and you'll know exactly the right time to take the photo, or you'll know exactly the right time not to be taking the photo. I think when you're out and you get a feeling, that you get goosebumps. Well, maybe I shouldn't be taking a picture here. Maybe I actually shouldn't be here. Maybe I just need to sit and appreciate this instead of trying to take 10,000 photos and post them on Instagram. Like, so I think there's, and I guess, you know, we have, it's not about climbing the mountain and getting to the top. It's the journey on the way in, and all the little things that you miss if you are so focused on getting to the waterfall at the end of the gorge or the top of the mountain. You might never get to the top of the mountain because of all of the incredible little things that are there on the way. Yeah.
I love that. Well, I'm curious for you, what do you hope that your photography accomplishes?
It's hard, isn't it? I hope that my photography accomplishes an emotive response to its viewers. Um, I I hope that my photography gives an appreciation of the incredible landscapes that are around us and the need to conserve those landscapes, whether you've seen them or not, or whether they're epic, whether they're epic or not, they're, things don't have to be World Heritage scale to be worth preserving. Um, and it's so important. My bugbear, how video games desensitize to guns and all that kind of stuff, and without starting a big gun debate on your channel, um, but
I
um,
appreciate that, because I don't need people.
um, but the same with photography. If we post beautiful mine sites, people are desensitized, and look how beautiful that you know wash pond is. It's not beautiful. It doesn't deserve to be. If whilst it's beautiful, there is an issue with that. So, well, there's a guy that's doing, I can't remember his name, that's doing Beautiful Toxic is his project at the moment, which I think it's Beautiful Toxic, but it's like an aerial documentary of um, beautiful toxic waste. Um, and the colours are insane, they're gorgeous, but it's toxic waste. And so there's, I guess I'm not an activist, but I'm conscious of how we can do things better, and we can do things better. And I understand that I wouldn't have my camera unless there was not a toxic waste pond somewhere. But I think that
Hmm.
the need through images, both beautiful landscapes and through documentary and beautiful documentary and ugly documentary um, and beautiful stories and ugly stories, that I think we as image creators, as image recorders, as recorders of life around us, have a real opportunity to make people see things are worth conserving, and they don't have to be epic to conserve. And it's important that we don't desensitize people. Yeah.
I'm, I was curious if you're familiar with J. Henry Fair.
No, I'm
He
not.
has a whole book called Industrial Scars,
Yeah.
and it's all aerial photography, and it's all like what you're discussing, like toxic waste and the what's happened with mines,
Yeah, it's just
the
tragic. It's
the af-
tragic.
but
Yeah.
his approach is like, I'm gonna show you these beautiful images to get your attention,
Yeah.
and then that's the hook.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna tell you like how crazy it is
What
that
it's
we can that
about.
this stuff exists. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's everywhere, and I think again, like I wouldn't have my camera if it wasn't for one of those holes. But we can do it
Sure.
better. We're there. We can do it better. Yeah.
Right, like maybe we don't always need the newest camera,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and oh, and now we know why there's not a photography company that sponsors this podcast.
No,
That's
but
funny.
yeah, like I mean, it's the oxymoron, isn't it? So yeah, but
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's real easy to feel hypocritical, right? Because we're using electricity to record this episode,
yeah,
and then,
that's right.
that electricity requires the consumption of resources unless all of our, unless everything's green
Yeah,
or whatever. So I mean, yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think if you know, if if people can see the beauty and see that that's worth that's worth fighting for. That's I think, yeah.
I like it. All right, well, tell us about, I think, what is it? Australia Geo, Nature Photographer of the
Ah,
Year,
so
and the traveling exhibition. Yeah.
yeah, so we have the Australian Geographic Nature Photographer of the Year in Australia. So I was lucky enough to win the landscape category for that this year with one of
Oh,
my
wow.
aerial images. So and that's travelling around Australia. Um, at the moment, it's still on in Adelaide, and then it's moving around the country. Yeah,
Was it just one image that,
yeah, just one image.
and which image is, how would you describe it?
Um, I describe it as a landscape within a landscape. So it's an aerial image, and it's of the alluvial fans. So like I see a tree and clouds and hills and things like that. So I call it a landscape within a landscape where it's actually creeks and it's a creeks. It's a dry season creek, a wet season creek system. So a dried out creek system, basically.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, how has that impacted you at all in terms of winning that? Has it gotten you print sales, or like what has it done for you?
So I did. It didn't get me print sales because I released a limited edition print earlier this year with my exhibition. I had an exhibition earlier this year, of that particular print. So I think like OzGeo um, allowed us to opt in for print sales with that exhibition, but I opted out because it was going to screw with my limited
Oh, right.
edition. Yeah, at the start of the year. So yeah, it's just been a good press and good features on it, and because it's in camera basically, so in camera comp, so it's nice because I think a lot of people just assume that you manipulate to the point where it's not near the original image, but so it's an in camera basically with minimal editing other than your standard contrast and adjustments. So yeah, um, yeah.
Is that particular approach to making photographs important to you?
I think it is because my technical skills are a little bit 2005 with Photoshop.
Okay, okay. No, that's
Uh,
that's fair.
Maybe
That's
not quite
fair.
2005, probably a bit more 2010. So I try and get it right in the camera as much as I can. Yeah. So, I mean, and you can make a good photo. You can't make a bad photo good, but you can very easily make a good photo bad um, in Photoshop most of the time, I think, anyway. Um, yeah, so no, I try and get it right. I try and get the conditions. I'm hopeless with dropping in skies, and actually, I'm really bad. I don't really know how to do it. I keep thinking I'm going to do an upgrade skills Photoshop, and it would probably really help if I read the Adobe newsletters that come out to my inbox every month and actually did their tutorials. But I need to do a bit of upskilling with Photoshop. So if anyone can suggest somebody, I'm all up for suggestions on some good Photoshop um, workshopping. I sort of did my Photoshop training when I converted from film to digital, and then I didn't do too much after that. A few little professional development type courses, but
Well, I mean, hey, it goes to show though that you don't necessarily have to use Photoshop to create beautiful photographs.
no, no, no. And I think it's the thrill of the chase, like that's half the fun of that's the good thing about photography is you get to go out there 25 times to a tree to wait till the light's perfect to get the shot, like it's or you
Yeah,
go up that's three-quarters of the fun I reckon is actually getting the image. So the less time I spend on the computer, I'd rather spend time on the computer researching than editing. Yeah,
that makes sense to me.
yeah.
All right, so along those same lines, tell us about the Fuji GFX Grant Challenge project that you're working on called
Uh,
Ebb and Flow.
Ebb and flow. So I applied for the Fuji GFX grant, which I don't know if you're familiar with the GFX
I'm
grant.
actually not. I mean, I
Uh,
know I'm familiar with Fuji GFX, but I didn't
uh,
know they had a grant.
yeah, so Fuji have a grant challenge every year, and where they give struggling photographers some money to do a project. And my project was ebb and flow. Well, they don't give you money to do the project. They contribute to some of the costs of the project. So you apply, there's an application process, and then I think there was five international, like regional, no, five Fuji worldwide grant winners, and then I think there was 10 regional grant winners. I'm not sure of the numbers. I'm sorry, Fuji, if I've got that wrong. But I was a regional grant winner, and I got some money to go towards my project Ebb and Flow, which is basically the story of water and life and how it impacts life from the air. So um, the relationship with water and the desert, the relationship with water and the ocean. Water is the ocean, but well, not really. The ocean is, how would you describe it? Ocean is an ecosystem. Um, so, and the savannas and basically the relationships of water with the landscape in Australia. And so that project, I handed 20 images over to Fuji um, about a month and a half ago now, 2 months ago. All shot on the GFX. I love the medium format because I was shooting 35 mil, well, 35 mil equivalent DSLR. Um, and that's on exhibition this month at Fuji Square in Japan, in Tokyo. And then I
Oh
think it
wow,
travels. And yeah, so my project, yeah, is basically the environmental relationship between water and life, and the life it gives and the life it takes away, um, and the life it
that's
nurtures.
awesome.
Yeah,
Well, congratulations on that.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I was shocked. It's I've been well, I guess I've been working on it for a long time, the Ebb and Flow series, and then it's I think I've nearly got there. So it will the Fuji part is done, and then my part, yeah, hopefully not too many more months shooting, and I think I will have a fairly comprehensive body of work. Yeah, yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I have one more question for you. Who do you recommend for the podcast? Who are some people that we need to learn more about?
Ah, well, Crystal Wright, an amazing photographer, but also an amazing adventurer woman. So she has some beautiful work and does some amazing things. If I could even climb a quarter of the mountains that girl climbs, like I would be happy. um, yeah. So Guy Havel, um, I love his work. His work is it's simple and the color palette is beautiful. The composition is beautiful. His his work. He did big documentary on, or documentary series on in the US last year, but he's an Australian and his work is amazing. Hugo, I don't know how to pronounce her name. Hugo.
Oh,
I just
Hui Bu
follow.
Ho?
Yeah, yeah. Have you had
Yeah,
her
she's
on?
great. Yeah, she's been on the show. Her work
Oh,
is fantastic.
just a master of black and white. Hey, well, I reckon.
Oh,
modern,
absolutely.
modern master of black and white. Just,
Whenever people ask me for recommendations on black and white, I'm like, gotta check this one
oh my
out.
God. And like, I've been following her for a number of years, and I just can't believe she hasn't got like, 2 million followers kind of thing. Like, her work is just exquisite. So good. Um, well, a local, sort of local NT girl that I think just takes beautiful images that sum up the Northern Territory beautifully is Jodie Bilski. And she's based in Darwin. So, yeah, I think she does some beautiful. Her colour palette's beautiful, and just takes some beautiful landscapes without hitting the saturation slider too much. And like, she's her work's it's very delicate and
Hmm.
just beautiful. Yeah, but that's who I would recommend. With obviously people like Mika who's already been, but yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Well, awesome. Well, Tanya, this has been super fun, and I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your spending the time in the bush to come hang out with us on the podcast.
thank you for having me. I hope I haven't
Of
talked too
course.
much.
Oh, no, not at all. Well, thank you to Tanya for the wonderful conversation on the show today. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness and your great recommendations. Congratulations on all of your newfound success, which of course is well deserved. As always, I love to hear from listeners on your recommendations for guests, or perhaps you think you'd make a good guest. Let me know. That's all for now. Thanks for stopping in, collaborating with us, and listening. See you next week.